Welcome to another edition of TEK Talk. This is our April edition, and with me are three very fulfilled gentlemen. I'm going to introduce first our youngest guest. He is Ryan McCarthy, and he's going to share with us his experience from him being a practicumer and now a full-fledged employee of a renowned company in Scotland. Well, our mainstay is Alex Kosyakov. He's a very young entrepreneur. He was a college student from Urbana-Champaign, and now he is quite successful with his venture, which he started from his garage. He is a technopreneur. Our host, of course, is Dr. Jonathan TOK. He is very promising. He has got a lot of credentials, which I don't want to read because if I'm going to read his credentials, it's going to take me a day. So I will just mention one of the most important projects that he just did years back. And I would like to mention that he's an author of a book called what's your book again?
It's a theory of everything. Things I wish I'd known at your age, yeah.
All right, yes. A theory of everything, things I wish I'd known at your age. And aside from that, he also he has a lot of accomplishments, which he would like to mention later once he takes over the show. All right, so ladies and gentlemen, we have a lot of things in store for you today. So just stay put and listen to these three gentlemen as they share with us their experiences on how they started and how they succeeded. So now I'd like to turn you over to Dr. Jonathan TOK.
Well, hi, welcome again to another edition. Thanks for that introduction, Angela. I'm John TOK. I'm a holistic energy scientist representing Silent Koala today. I've spent quite a long time in the energy storage arena, and I've had the great pleasure of working alongside Ryan for the last several years. And Ryan has been an absolutely amazing resource for AMSI where we work. He's often gone way beyond his post and achieved things that a student of his level wouldn't have ever dreamed of. So I'm really looking forward to this new angle that we're taking on the show today, talking to Ryan about his apprenticeship, how he got into it, and we'll end up asking him what advice he would give to anyone in his position in joining, or what to expect of what we believe to be a very exciting arena. So really looking forward to talking to Ryan today. Alex, if you want to just briefly introduce yourself, and then we'll hand over to Ryan to introduce himself.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, thanks, John. Great to be back on Tech Talk, and very nice to meet you, Ryan. Alex, co-founder and CEO of a battery startup called Natrion. We're based in the U.S., in a town called Urbana-Champaign, just south of Chicago. And yeah, we've been working on this company for about the last 5 years now. Although the company in its current form probably around the last 2.5 years, maybe. But what we focus on are solid-state battery technologies for various high-performance applications, especially automotive, but also consumer electronics and aviation and other things. Really, we seek to be a component supplier to larger battery manufacturers, and provide them with technology that would be useful for next generation performance and safety and applications. So we're still pretty early stage, probably around 18 people on our staff at the moment, about half part-time, half full-time. So still a pretty small team. But we've been moving along, and had the pleasure to work with John. Well, actually, John was one of our first advisors or mentors. So for most of our time so far. So yeah, nice to meet you, Ryan.
Yeah, Ryan, over to you. If you want to just tell us a bit about yourself, maybe tell us how you got into this and what are your positive experiences that you've had, what you've learned from your experience.
Yep. So it's a pleasure to be here, first of all. And I am currently working as a fourth year electrical engineering apprentice for a battery manufacturer in the UK. It's allowed me to get involved in so many different aspects. It's maybe not been your conventional apprenticeship. I've got involved with next gen battery projects, next generation battery module projects, and various other kind of interesting and exciting new projects that are going to be coming forth over the next few years. Apprenticeships are, I would say, one of the best ways to get into any industry, whether that's a business apprenticeship, electrical, mechanical, trade. You get all sorts of apprenticeships. You get apprentice nurses, I think, now even. It's a great foundation because it not only gives you work experience, but it gives you an education, and a lot of companies are willing to take that education quite far, to the point of potentially your bachelor's, even higher possibly, and they're willing to sponsor and fund you. So instead of raking up the student debts that you would get if you went to college or went to university, you get paid the whole time. It's maybe not the best rate. It's, I think, about $4.35 at the moment for the first year, but you are getting learning, you're getting on-site experience. So you come out of your apprenticeship not only with an education, but you also come out with work experience, which is, in my opinion, something employers look for in a lot of people. Because sadly, I say sadly, my opinion will come out later on. But sadly, I think we are focused now in interviews, especially getting in the door, is a piece of paper that we focus on having a PhD or focus on having a bachelor's rather than possibly work experience.
Yeah, no, thanks, Ryan. I think you make a really, really good point. I think I'm not suggesting either way, but I do think that there is so much focus now on getting qualifications and being qualified in order to do a job. And as you rightly said, that often incurs a lot of debt along the way. Whereas I personally think that absolutely, if you're more perhaps on hand orientated, then the value you get from actually learning your trade whilst doing your trade is far more valuable in my experience than actually going through the qualification system. So thank you for bringing that up. Are there any particular experiences that you've had that have been very valuable to you, or you've got the most joy from?
That's a difficult question. I think there's been a lot of good and bad moments in my apprenticeship, I would say. Certainly some of the good ones has been getting to kind of travel to various sites all over the UK and get to work with different people, a lot of people who are significantly smarter than me and probably forever will be significantly smarter than me. But it's always the opportunities that you get as an apprentice that you may not get as a student, from my point of view. For example, working on that next gen module project that we had was really new and interesting to me because it was taking your kind of electrical connection side and taking in the whole mathematics side of things that takes into your master and slave boards, for example, with your battery management system, as well as creepage and clearance, which I learned a little bit about from one of our very talented electrical engineers. So it's a whole different side, and the battery industry has such a big thing to offer and will just continue to grow as we continue to develop into net zero and even more battery manufacturers pop up all over the world.
Thanks, Ryan. I mean, having worked with you for some time, as I said, you're an extremely driven and dedicated individual. Where do you get your drive from? Where do you get your passion from?
I'd say both my parents actually are both very kind of driven people, very goal oriented people. And I've become through friends and family, I've become quite stubborn when I have a goal, say I want to achieve that goal. And I think it's something you can learn, but it also helps to have it kind of instilled into you from quite a young age. And it helps to kind of go, I need to get this done by this date and setting deadlines. And that's where, although a lot of school work maybe doesn't seem appropriate at the time, like algebra, when am I going to use algebra in the real world? The elements of school saying I have a deadline to meet, and you have to kind of work towards that deadline and make sure you've handed in homework for, say, Friday, something like that. Just small things like that can get you into a really good mindset if you're planning it and achieving it, and it gets you into a good mindset for the workplace.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good point. I mean, I don't personally have too much good to say about school, but I think that the discipline that you can derive for yourself, and as you suggested, is a really very useful skill or, as I say, discipline to have in the workplace, because as you're aware, we're often under a lot of time and budget related pressures. And I think, I can see you've also learned a tremendous amount about prioritization and knowing, and you've also shown a lot of tenacity in knowing who you are and knowing what your remit is and what you can deliver and what you can't or don't want to be responsible for. So, I think, yeah, if anyone's watching and thinking about a career, then Ryan has got a lot to offer in terms of his whole ethos on not only work but life itself. Alex, do you have any questions for Ryan before we ask him what his advice would be for students in his position?
But I guess well that was going to be my question. So
Oh,
What would be my advice for students in my kind of position who are going through an apprenticeship?
yeah. I mean, I think just what would, if you were talking to a group of students who are on the fence as to whether to go down the energy storage route, what would you say to them to either encourage them or discourage them?
I'm a strong advocate for the apprenticeship program, and I would be encouraging people not only to look at what apprenticeship and kind of maybe what they want to do. So if you're a little bit more hands-on, maybe go for a trade apprenticeship. If you are a bit more choppy and changey and maybe don't want to spend as long, go for a business apprenticeship. Business apprenticeships are usually 6 months to a year, max of 2 years, I think. Trade apprenticeships are usually 4. So that's what I'm doing just now. I would say look at the industry. Oil and gas, like it or not, is probably still going to be around for quite a while, and people are still flooding to oil and gas. There's certainly where I'm based, there's several apprenticeships that get run, both welders, mechanical, fabricators, electricians. So, for example, they'll get you 18th edition certified. They'll get you doing different kinds of electrical work, whether it's commercial or domestic. And there's a wide variety of things that you can look into. But I've always been one to recommend the apprenticeship route because you are earning a wage at the same time, which is always nice, especially for the weekends. But it's also quite important to get the work experience, because a lot of companies sometimes aren't so keen to hire someone who's maybe got the papers, but they don't have the experience.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, as I say, I personally think that in many cases, experience is actually far more valuable than qualifications. Although, don't get me wrong, I mean, qualifications are important, but I think that a lot of what you need to learn, you will actually learn throughout the course of your apprenticeship. And the beauty of doing it that way is that you're not only learning it, but you're also immediately applying it. So what I found during my studies was, and as you alluded to earlier, you learn stuff and you think, well, why am I ever going to need this? You know, even though I've subsequently realized why later on in my life, I think I would have been far more enthusiastic and bought into it more if I was actually applying it at the time. So yeah, I really appreciate that. In terms of the battery industry, though, what do you find exciting about the battery industry, or is it just something that cropped up and you followed your nose and there you are?
Well, I actually applied for a few apprenticeships when I was up here, and the battery apprenticeship was the only one I got. But I think, I don't know if I can actually say this, I'll say it anyway. There is battery apprenticeships coming up. They are trying to develop them that's more tailored towards the battery industry, opposed to kind of what I'm doing, which is electrical, which does tie in, but they're aiming for specific battery apprenticeships, which will be better. So it kind of teaches you wet side coating, teaches you dry side building of whether it's jelly rolls or stacks, Z-fold stacks. It's teaching you both. So I think the battery industry I would like to stick with if I can. And kind of alluding to your question, because it's a growing industry. There's a lot of, I'm quite a tech geek. I like the kind of technological side of things, and that it is an ever growing industry, and we're finding more and more different areas in which we can use batteries. Some industries will need batteries to get smaller with more capacity. Some industries are going to need batteries to last longer at more extreme conditions. There's so many different areas that the battery industry is seeping into, even areas of the oil and gas industry, which seems a little bit counterintuitive, but there is that crossover that's happening, and it's just getting everywhere and starting to build into obviously the automotive market massively. But the other industry I think to watch out for is hydrogen, because I think that's going to be exciting and ties in nicely with the energy storage kind of battery industry.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And then just to draw on your point, I think you've actually come in as an apprentice pretty early doors to what is now a huge expansion in the industry. And I mean, I when I first joined or started working with the company we work with, we were talking with various universities and colleges about beginning to develop these courses, if not apprenticeships, but certainly training courses, college courses, you know, and it's really only beginning to open the doors now to a lot more students. Alex, do you have, is there any activity? I'm sure there's lots of activity going on in the States surrounding how to educate new students in this growing business environment.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think those kinds of efforts have just actually really started. So, for example, there's a bit of news in the past couple of weeks where, Stellantis, which is this multinational automotive manufacturer, started working with various agencies in the U.S. government to, build out resources for people in the U.S. to get a technical education for battery manufacturing, because there really has been a lack of it here in the U.S. In the U.S., there's been a lot of gigafactory announcements, like all these people want to build up all this battery production capability, but the talent just isn't there. There isn't really, people trained and that would be able to work on these factory lines. And actually, a lot of these American companies have been recruiting from Europe. So Europe's done a much better job, both in academia and in schools, but then outside of that, to develop a trained workforce for battery manufacturing. And just kind of put in perspective, I mean, we see this firsthand on Natrion is, we're kind of at that stage in scale up where we need people more with more that are, I guess, production development oriented versus kind of pure material engineering or material development. And it's really tough to find those people. So finding somebody with a PhD who studied some aspect of battery materials is a lot easier as it turns out. So it's I mean the US it's coming along in the US, but it's going to take some time. But it's great to hear Ryan and other people like Ryan are pursuing this path for their career, and because it's definitely what's going to be needed, whether in Europe or the US or elsewhere.
Yeah, that's really interesting, Alex. I mean, I wasn't. Thank you for that. I did anticipate that you'd probably have a similar situation with training people in the US, particularly as we're aware most recently that the US government is providing certainly a better incentive for companies like the one that Ryan are working for than certainly the UK is doing so. And that to me looks like a very interesting situation, because they'll be potentially providing the funding for a business that then needs to hire their staff from Europe and anywhere else in order that they can get people who can hit the ground running. Other than that, exactly what Ryan's doing, providing apprenticeships and stuff. And what's your, Alex, just going back to what Ryan was saying about the benefit of an apprenticeship above the general sort of schooling route. What's your opinion on that? Because look at you are now CEO of what I see as being a really successful company, and what you've learned in the last sort of 4 or 5 years has just been absolutely phenomenal. You could not have learned that at school. I'm absolutely certain.
No, we appreciate it. No, I'm not. No, school is still very valuable, kind of in my mind. But it's not that. But there is definitely a different experience and different set of things you learn. Spending some time in industry and doing that early on. I find that we do kind of a similar thing where we just hired our summer class of, we call them internships, but our summer class of interns, and so these are students from the University of Illinois who are going to be working full time in our facilities over the summer, and this is the second year that we're running this program, and we had really positive feedback from the folks who went through it last year, the first year that we ran it, where these are primarily again, electrical engineers, chemical engineers, materials engineers, and I think in Europe it might be a little bit different. Where in Europe, at least, academia does try to orient you towards industry, versus I feel like in the US academia, like if you get a master's or PhD or higher education in the US, the pipeline is towards staying in faculty, right? And if you get a PhD, then you get a postdoc, and then you become a professor, or whatever. Versus in Europe, I feel like it is better in the sense of where you get a PhD, it's going to be useful in industry, for example. But needless to say, the feedback we've gotten from some of the students who have worked for our company has been really tremendous in that they feel like they're working on, like, what they always say to me is that they feel like they're working on real things, right? Where it's these are when they work here at Natrion, it's we're getting feedback from customers, right, and having to apply that to products and solve challenges, and solve challenges revolving around that, right? So there's a real customer, a real product, a real need, and a real solution that we're providing. And it's a lot more challenging as a result, but we've also found that the students find it a lot more fulfilling. And it's these people have worked for us. They've gone on to work at we had we've had students who worked here and then went on to work at like biomedical companies or whatever. They still found it very applicable in the sense that it's still hardcore industrial R&D, and those kinds of skills are going to be useful really anywhere else. Hard skills, right? And so yeah, so we found that to definitely be a positive experience for with these programs.
Right, great. No, thank you, Alex. Yeah, so I think have you any more questions for Ryan? I was gonna just to give you a heads up, Ryan. I'm gonna ask you what your parting comment would be for anyone, and any advice that you want to give anyone as your parting comment in a minute. But Alex, is there anything else you want to ask Ryan about at this stage?
No, I mean, no, thanks, Ryan, for kind of sharing your story, and I'm glad, like, even if it's accidentally, you ended up in energy storage. But you're absolutely right, and like, maybe it was maybe it was tech or .com, 10, 20 years ago, and then silicon and semiconductors 10, 20 years ago before that. But batteries and energy storage, that's really the next wave, or at least I don't know. That's what I think. So John might agree with me, but
yeah, absolutely. And I got into this just by luck as well. So I just followed my nose, and I think one of the things I'm extremely grateful for being in this industry, particularly over the last several years, is that it's still been pretty buoyant. I mean, we've lost a few of the big players in the UK, but in general, the battery and energy storage arena has been pretty stable relative to the rest of the economy. So, I've at least been extremely grateful for that. Yeah, so Ryan, yeah, we'll wrap this up now if we don't have any more questions. What would be your parting comments to any advice you'd give to anyone, your number one comment or something you'd give to anyone in your position?
I would say try and get an apprenticeship if you can.
Yeah.
And stick with it. Possibly stick with the company after it's finished if they offer you a role, and develop into that role. And just take any training that you're offered, because they will offer. And the nice thing with apprenticeships is they do offer a role generally after you're finished, because they've spent years and quite a lot of cash training you. A lot of time is invested in you and training you, and a lot of support goes towards you, or it should. And if you stick with them, they generally are more willing to keep, and you effectively have a kind of bottom up view of the company, where you know what it's like to be on the very bottom rung. And then potentially, if you climb the ladder, you can help others who are just coming in as apprentices, because you know what it was like in their position, and you can help them kind of develop. So it offers a great kind of opportunity at the bottom level, where you're maybe learning, and you might even just be sweeping the floor some days, but it's all learning, chatting to different people. And then as you get up and kind of climb the ladder of corporate, you have the opportunity to then train some of the youngsters coming through and use your own experience to that. So it's fulfilling the whole way through.
No, fantastic. Just to pick up on the point you made, you said and stick with it. Is that alluding to, do you have any experience of people who have not stuck with their apprenticeships and perhaps not done as well as they could have done?
The only experience I have with someone who didn't stick with their apprenticeship is doing better now than when they left the apprenticeship. So I don't know if I should share that.
But in general, that your comment remains congruent with what you're saying.
Usually, yeah.
If you done an apprenticeship through a company, you've got to know the company, they've got to know you, they've invested their time and effort into you. You know, it's far more likely that they'll have something or even make a role for you at the end of it. So yeah. Oh, great. Thanks very much, Ryan. Thanks, Alex. And yeah, it's taken a while for us to get this together without somebody making excuses. So thanks very much. It's been a fantastic chat. And I don't know if we're handing over back to Angela, or if we're just going to say goodbye. She's not listening, so we'll just say goodbye. She's busy with her own stuff. Right. Okay. Thanks very much, guys. And
Yeah.
Alex, we'll
Thank
see
you.
you next time.
Nice to meet you, Ryan. Thanks, John.
Nice meeting you.
Thanks
Cheers.
very much. Cheers.